Maria Elena Vasquez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she scrubbed the marble floors of the Blackwood mansion. Her hands were raw and cracked from years of cleaning with harsh chemicals, but she couldn't afford to complain. At 23 years old, she was the sole provider for her younger siblings after their parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. The Blackwood family was one of the wealthiest in the city, owning a vast empire of hotels and restaurants. Maria had been working as their maid for 2 years now, earning barely enough to keep food on the table and pay rent for the tiny apartment she shared with her brother Carlos and sister Isabella. Every morning, Maria would arrive at the mansion before dawn and work until late at night. She cleaned 17 rooms, prepared meals, did laundry, and maintained the gardens. The work was exhausting, but she was grateful to have it. Jobs were hard to come by in their neighborhood, especially for someone like her who never finished high school. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, the lady of the house, was a stern woman in her 50s who rarely acknowledged Maria's existence except to point out missed spots or assign additional tasks. Her husband, Richard Blackwood, was equally cold and distant. They had one son, Jonathan, who was away at university most of the time. On this particular evening in October, Maria was finishing her duties when she heard Mrs. Blackwood arguing loudly with someone on the phone in the study. Maria tried not to listen, but the walls were thin, and Mrs. Blackwood's voice carried throughout the house. "I don't care what the circumstances are," Mrs. Blackwood was saying. "We cannot be associated with this scandal. The reputation of our family is at stake." Maria continued polishing the silver candlesticks nearby, trying to ignore the conversation. She had learned long ago that the wealthy had problems just like everyone else, only their problems involved much larger sums of money. After completing her evening tasks, Maria gathered her cleaning supplies and headed toward the service exit. She always left through the back door, as instructed by Mrs. Blackwood. The front entrance was for family and important guests only. As she walked through the kitchen, Maria noticed that the trash bins hadn't been emptied. She sighed and decided to take care of it before leaving. The garbage area was located behind the mansion, near the garden shed. The October night was unusually cold, and Maria pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The Blackwood property was extensive, with perfectly manicured gardens and a small forest at the back. Street lights barely reached this area, leaving most of the grounds in darkness. As Maria approached the garbage bins, she heard a faint sound that made her stop in her tracks. It was soft crying, almost like a wounded animal. She looked around but couldn't see anything in the darkness. The sound came again, definitely coming from somewhere near the bins. Maria took out her phone and turned on its flashlight. The weak beam of light revealed several large garbage bags and recycling containers. But, as she moved closer, the light fell upon something that made her heart skip a beat. Partially hidden behind one of the bins was a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be expensive fabric. The crying was coming from inside the bundle. Maria's hands trembled as she approached and carefully pulled back the cloth. Inside was a baby, no more than a few months old. The child was pale, almost unnaturally so, with striking dark hair and the most unusual eyes Maria had ever seen. They seemed to shimmer in the phone's light, almost like they had their own glow. "Oh my God," Maria whispered, immediately scooping the baby into her arms. Who would do such a thing? The baby was cold but alive, wearing what looked like expensive clothing. A small silver pendant hung around its tiny neck, intricate and beautiful, unlike anything Maria had ever seen. The baby stopped crying as soon as Maria held it, looking up at her with those strange, captivating eyes. Maria looked around frantically, wondering if someone was nearby, if this was some kind of mistake. But the area was deserted. Someone had deliberately left this child here, among the garbage, as if it were something to be thrown away. Her mind raced with questions. Should she call the police? Should she go back to the mansion and tell the Blackwoods? But something held her back. The conversation she had overheard earlier echoed in her mind. Mrs. Blackwood had mentioned a scandal, something about reputation. Maria examined the baby more closely under the phone's light. Despite the unusual paleness and those strange eyes, the child seemed healthy. It wasn't crying anymore but was looking at her with an intelligence that seemed far beyond its apparent age. The expensive clothing and the silver pendant suggested this wasn't an abandoned child from the streets. This baby came from wealth, from a family that could afford the finest things. Yet someone had thrown it away like trash. Maria's heart ached as she held the small, warm body against her chest. She thought of her own siblings, how she would do anything to protect them. How could anyone abandon such a helpless creature? The temperature was dropping rapidly, and Maria knew she had to make a decision quickly. The baby needed warmth, food, and safety. She couldn't just leave it here, even if she called for help. By the time authorities arrived, the child could be seriously ill from the cold. She looked back at the mansion, its windows glowing warmly in the distance. The Blackwoods were probably settling in for the evening, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their backyard. Maria wondered if they knew about the baby, if they were somehow connected to this situation. The baby made a small sound, not quite crying but a soft noise that tugged at Maria's heartstrings. She made her decision. She would take the child home with her tonight, make sure it was safe and warm, and figure out what to do in the morning. Maria carefully wrapped the baby more securely in the fabric and hurried toward the bus stop. Her shift was officially over, and no one would miss her until tomorrow morning. She had enough baby formula at home from when her neighbor's infant had stayed with them briefly last month. As the bus rumbled through the city streets toward her neighborhood, Maria looked down at the sleeping child in her arms. The baby seemed peaceful now, its breathing steady and calm. But those eyes, when they had been open, held secrets that Maria couldn't begin to understand. She thought about her own struggles, working multiple jobs just to survive, and wondered what kind of life this child had been destined for before being abandoned. Whatever the circumstances, Maria was determined to give it the love and care it deserved, at least for tonight. The bus reached her stop, and Maria carefully climbed down, protecting the baby from the cold night air. Her apartment building was run down, with peeling paint and broken streetlights, a stark contrast to the luxury of the Blackwood mansion. As she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, Maria wondered what her siblings would say when she walked in with a baby. Carlos, who was 17, was usually studying at this hour, while 15-year-old Isabella would be watching television or doing homework. Maria paused at her door, keys in hand, looking down at the sleeping child. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but she couldn't have made any other choice. This baby needed help, and Maria had never been able to turn away from someone in need. She quietly opened the door and stepped into her small apartment, ready to face whatever consequences her decision might bring. Little did she know that this single act of compassion would change not only her life but the lives of everyone around her in ways she could never have imagined. The baby stirred slightly in her arms as she closed the door behind her, and, for just a moment, those unusual eyes opened again, seeming to look directly at Maria with an expression of gratitude that was far too mature for such a young child. Maria quietly entered her apartment, hoping not to wake her siblings. The small living room was dimly lit by the glow of the television, where Isabella was curled up on the worn couch doing homework. Her brother Carlos emerged from the kitchen, a worried expression on his face. "Maria, you're later than usual tonight," Carlos said, then stopped when he noticed the bundle in her arms. "What is that?" Isabella looked up from her textbooks, her eyes widening when she saw the baby. "Maria! Where did you get a baby?" Maria sat down carefully on the couch, still holding the child securely. "I found this little one abandoned behind the mansion where I work. Someone left him in the garbage area like he was nothing." "Are you serious?" Isabella moved closer, her homework forgotten. "Who would do such a terrible thing?" The baby was awake now, looking around the small apartment with those strange, luminous eyes. In the better lighting of their home, Maria could see more clearly just how unusual the child was. His skin was almost translucent, and his dark hair had an otherworldly quality to it. "We should call the police," Carlos suggested, though his voice was uncertain. "Or child services." Maria shook her head. "I thought about that, but it was so cold outside. This baby needed immediate help. I couldn't just leave him there while waiting for someone to arrive." Isabella gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "He's so pale. Do you think he's sick?" "I don't know," Maria admitted. "But he seems alert and responsive. Look at how he's watching us." Indeed, the baby was observing each of them with an intensity that was unsettling. Those eyes seemed to follow their movements, and, occasionally, the child would make soft sounds as if trying to communicate.
What's that around his neck? Isabella pointed to the silver pendant.
Maria carefully lifted the pendant to examine it more closely. It was intricately designed with symbols she didn't recognize, and, despite being silver, it felt warm to the touch.
The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly expensive and, probably antique.
This is not something you'd find in any ordinary jewelry store, Maria murmured.
This baby comes from wealth, that's certain. Carlos frowned. Then, why was he thrown away?
Rich families have resources.
They have options. That's what I keep wondering, Maria said. Something about this doesn't make sense.
The baby began to fuss, and Maria realized he was probably hungry. She sent Isabella to prepare formula while she changed him into some of Carlos's old baby clothes that they had saved from when he was small. The expensive clothing the baby had been wearing was beautiful but impractical for everyday care. As Maria fed the baby, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The conversation she had overheard between Mrs. Blackwood and someone on the phone kept replaying in her mind. The mention of scandal and family reputation seemed too coincidental.
Maria, Isabella said softly, watching the baby drink his formula, there's something different about him. The way he looks at us, it's like he understands everything we're saying. Carlos nodded in agreement. And his eyes. I've never seen anything like them. They almost seem to glow.
Maria had noticed the same thing but hadn't wanted to voice her thoughts. There was definitely something extraordinary about this child, something that went beyond the usual range of normal. The next morning, Maria called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She couldn't leave the baby with her siblings while she went to the mansion, and she needed time to figure out her next steps. Around noon, there was an urgent knocking at their door. Maria peered through the peephole and saw a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, wearing an expensive dark suit, and had an air of authority about him. Behind him stood 2 other similarly dressed men.
Who is it?
Carlos whispered.
I don't know, Maria replied quietly. But they look official. The knocking continued, more insistent now.
Maria made a quick decision and handed the baby to Isabella.
Take him into the bedroom and don't come out unless I call you. Isabella nodded and disappeared with the child.
Maria took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping the security chain attached.
Maria Elena Vasquez, the man asked in a deep, commanding voice. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? My name is Alexander Blackwood, the man said. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. Maria's blood turned cold. Blackwood.
This had to be connected to the family she worked for, but she had never seen this man before. He was younger than Mr. Richard Blackwood, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and pale skin that reminded her of the baby. I'm sorry, I don't understand, Maria said, trying to keep her voice steady.
I think you do, Alexander replied. May I come in? This is a matter of extreme importance. Maria hesitated.
Everything about this man screamed danger, but she was curious about what he knew.
Are you related to the Blackwoods I work for? Richard is my uncle, Alexander said.
And what we need to discuss concerns the child you found last night.
Maria's heart raced. How could he possibly know about the baby? I don't know what you're talking about. Alexander's expression remained calm, but there was something predatory in his eyes. Miss Vasquez, I can hear the child from here. His scent is unmistakable. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be.
Something about the way he said scent made Maria's skin crawl. She glanced back toward the bedroom, wondering if she should try to protect the baby or if this man truly was the child's father.
Who are you really? Maria asked. And who is that baby?
The child is my son, Alexander said simply.
And I am what you might call, not entirely human.
Maria stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly.
What do you mean?
I think you've already noticed that the child is unusual, Alexander continued. The pale skin, the luminous eyes, the intelligence far beyond his apparent age. These are traits he inherited from me. You're talking nonsense, Maria said, but, even as she spoke, pieces were falling into place in her mind. The baby's unusual features, his strange behavior, the expensive pendant.
Am I? Alexander asked. Tell me, Miss Vasquez, how much formula has he consumed? How often has he cried? Have you noticed anything different about the way he responds to light?
Maria realized with growing alarm that the baby had barely eaten anything since she brought him home. He had taken only a small amount of formula and hadn't cried once since that first night. And, now that she thought about it, he seemed more active in the evening and night hours.
I can see you're beginning to understand, Alexander said. My son is not entirely human, Miss Vasquez.
He is part of a world that exists alongside yours but remains hidden from most people.
You're saying he's...
Maria couldn't bring herself to say the word.
Half vampire, yes, Alexander confirmed.
His mother was human, but his father, that would be me, is something else entirely.
Maria felt dizzy.
This was impossible. Vampires were just stories, myths from old movies and books. But, as she looked at Alexander's pale skin and the way his eyes seemed to reflect light, doubt crept into her mind.
Why was he abandoned? Maria asked. If he's your son, why was he thrown away like garbage? Alexander's expression darkened. Because my family believes he is an abomination. A half-breed that threatens the purity of our bloodline.
They were supposed to dispose of him permanently.
They wanted to kill a baby? Maria was horrified. The Vampire Council decreed it, Alexander said. Mixed-blood children are forbidden.
They represent a threat to our secrecy and our way of life.
But, you're here now, Maria pointed out. You're looking for him. Because I couldn't go through with it, Alexander admitted.
When I held my son for the first time, when I looked into his eyes, I couldn't destroy him. So I arranged for him to be left where a kind person might find him, hoping he could live a normal human life.
Maria's mind was reeling. Why are you telling me all this? Why not just take him and disappear?
Because in the past 24 hours, the Vampire Council has learned that the child still lives, Alexander said grimly. They are sending hunters to find him. If they locate him first, they will complete what I failed to do.
And, what does that mean for me? Maria asked, though she already feared the answer.
It means that anyone who has had contact with the child is now in danger, Alexander said.
The council cannot allow witnesses to exist.
They will eliminate anyone who knows about our kind. Maria felt the walls of her small world crashing down around her. All she had done was try to help an abandoned baby, and now she and her siblings were in mortal danger. However, Alexander continued, I have a proposition for you. Help me protect my son, and I will ensure the safety of your family. Refuse, and you will all be dead within the week. From the bedroom came the sound of the baby making soft cooing noises, oblivious to the discussion about his fate. Maria realized that her simple act of compassion had pulled her into a world she never knew existed, a world where her choices could mean the difference between life and death for everyone she loved.
What exactly are you asking me to do? Maria whispered.
Alexander stepped closer to the door, and Maria could smell something unusual about him, something wild and dangerous. I'm asking you to help me raise my son in secret, to help him learn to navigate both the human and vampire worlds, and to help me protect him from those who would see him destroyed.
And my siblings? My job? My life?
Your old life is over, Miss Vasquez, Alexander said matter-of-factly. The moment you picked up that child, everything changed. Now the only question is whether you'll embrace this new reality or become a victim of it. Maria looked back toward the bedroom where Isabella was hiding with the baby, then, at Carlos who was standing nearby, fear evident in his young face. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built since their parents died, was about to disappear. But, as she thought about the unusual child in her bedroom, the baby who had looked at her with such trust and intelligence, she realized she couldn't abandon him any more than she could abandon her own siblings. If I agree to help you, Maria said carefully, how do I know you won't just take him and disappear once he's safe? Alexander smiled for the first time since arriving, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be entirely human.
Because, Miss Vasquez, you are the first human to show my son genuine kindness. He has already bonded with you. Vampire children imprint on their primary caregivers very strongly.
Even if I wanted to separate you from him now, it would cause him significant trauma.
So I'm stuck with this whether I like it or not.
We're all stuck with this, Alexander corrected. The question is whether we work together to keep my son alive and safe, or whether we all die trying to run from problems we can't escape. Maria took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change the course of her life forever. But, as she thought about the innocent child in the next room, a child who had already lost so much, she knew there was really only one choice she could make. "I'll help you," Maria said, her voice stronger than she felt.
"But, I have conditions." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, Miss Vasquez."
"If you want my help protecting your son, then you'll listen to what I have to say," Maria replied firmly. "My siblings know nothing about your world, and I want to keep it that way. They need to be able to live normal lives."
"That may not be possible," Alexander said.
"They've already seen the child."
"Then, we make it possible," Maria insisted.
"You said you have power in your world.
Use it."
Alexander studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
"Very well. I can arrange for their memories of the last day to be modified.
They will remember that you took in a human baby whose parents died in an accident.
Nothing more."
"And their safety?"
"Will be guaranteed as long as you cooperate," Alexander promised. "I'll provide protection for them, though they'll never know it exists."
Maria felt some of the tension leave her shoulders.
"What about my job?"
"Mrs. Blackwood will expect me to return to work."
"You won't be returning to my uncle's house," Alexander said.
"He and his wife were the ones who were supposed to ensure my son's death. They know I took the child from them, and they'll assume he's dead."
"It needs to stay that way." "Then, how will I support my family?"
"You'll work for me now," Alexander said simply. "Caring for my son will be a full-time position, and it pays significantly better than scrubbing floors."
From the bedroom, Isabella called out softly, "Maria? The baby is crying." Maria looked at Alexander, who nodded. "Bring them out. It's time they understood what we're dealing with."
Maria called her siblings into the living room. Isabella carried the baby, who had indeed begun to cry softly. As soon as the child saw Alexander, however, he became quiet, his unusual eyes fixed on the man's face.
"This is Alexander," Maria told her siblings. "He's the baby's father." Carlos frowned. "Where have you been? Why did you abandon your son?"
"It's complicated," Alexander said, his voice gentler than it had been with Maria. "There were people who wanted to hurt him, and I had to find a way to keep him safe." Isabella looked between Alexander and the baby, noting their similar pale complexion and dark hair.
"He looks like you," she said. "What's his name?" Alexander hesitated.
"In my world, he would have been called Damien. But perhaps it's time for him to have a more human name." "I like Damien," Isabella said, smiling at the baby.
"It's strong."
"Damien it is then," Alexander agreed, and something in his expression softened as he watched his son respond to Isabella's gentle voice. Over the next several hours, Alexander explained the situation in terms that Carlos and Isabella could understand without revealing the supernatural elements. He told them that the baby's mother had died, that his own family had rejected the child due to his mixed heritage, and that he needed Maria's help to care for Damien while he worked to resolve family conflicts.
"What about school?" Carlos asked practically.
"Isabella and I still need to finish our education."
"You'll continue attending school as normal," Alexander assured them.
"In fact, I'll be arranging for you both to transfer to better schools in a safer neighborhood."
Isabella's eyes widened. "Really? We're moving?" Alexander nodded. "This building isn't secure enough for my son. We'll be relocating to a house where I can provide better protection."
That evening, after Carlos and Isabella had gone to their rooms, Alexander sat with Maria in the living room while she fed Damien. The baby drank very little formula, but Alexander explained that was normal for children like him.
"How often will you be around?" Maria asked. Babies need consistency. I'll visit every few days, Alexander said. My presence in the human world is complicated. The less attention I draw, the safer we all are. What about when he gets older? Won't he need to understand what he is? Alexander's expression grew troubled. Eventually, yes. When he reaches adolescence, his vampire traits will become more pronounced.
He'll need training to control them.
And, until then?
Until then, he'll live as much of a human life as possible, Alexander said. With you as his guardian, he'll learn human values, human emotions, human relationships. These things will help him navigate both worlds when the time comes. Maria looked down at Damien, who was watching her with those eerily intelligent eyes.
What if I make mistakes? What if I don't know how to handle the supernatural aspects of raising him?
Then, we'll figure it out together, Alexander said, surprising her with the warmth in his voice. You've already shown more love and care for my son in 2 days than my own family showed in months.
Trust your instincts.
3 weeks later, Maria found herself standing in the kitchen of a beautiful suburban house, preparing bottles for Damien while Carlos and Isabella got ready for school in their new bedrooms upstairs. The transition had been smoother than she had expected. Alexander had been true to his word. The house was spacious and secure, with a state-of-the-art security system that he claimed would alert him to any supernatural threats.
Carlos had enrolled in an excellent high school with a strong science program, while Isabella was thriving in a school with an outstanding arts department.
Maria's job caring for Damien came with a salary that was 3 times what she had earned at the Blackwood mansion, plus health insurance and educational benefits for her siblings. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about paying bills or putting food on the table. Damien himself was growing rapidly, both physically and mentally. At what should have been 3 months old, he displayed the development of a 6-month-old baby. He was sitting up, responding to his name, and showing preferences for different people and activities. Most remarkably, he had bonded intensely with Maria's family. He would calm down immediately when Isabella sang to him, laugh when Carlos made silly faces, and reach for Maria whenever she entered a room. It was as if he truly understood that these people were his family now. Alexander visited every few days, usually in the evening after the siblings had gone to bed. He would spend time with Damien, teaching him things that seemed far too advanced for an infant. Maria would watch them together, noting how Alexander's cold demeanor would soften completely when he held his son. He's growing faster than normal human children, Alexander explained one evening as they watched Damien attempt to crawl. By his first birthday, he'll likely have the development of a 2-year-old. Is that going to cause problems when he starts interacting with other children? Maria asked. We'll manage it, Alexander said.
Advanced development isn't unheard of in human children.
As long as we're careful about what he demonstrates in public, he should be able to integrate normally. As the weeks turned to months, Maria began to understand the full scope of what she had taken on. Damien wasn't just unusually intelligent, he seemed to have instincts and abilities that were definitely not human. He could see in complete darkness, was unnaturally strong for his size, and sometimes seemed to understand conversations happening in other parts of the house. But, alongside these supernatural traits, he was also developing very human emotions and attachments. He loved to be read to, enjoyed playing with toys, and would get upset when separated from his family. Maria realized that Alexander had been right. The human love and care Damien received was shaping him in ways that would help him navigate both worlds. One evening in late winter, Alexander arrived at the house with an unusually serious expression. We have a problem, he announced after Maria had put Damien down for the night. What kind of problem? Maria asked, though she could guess from his tone that it involved the vampire world. The council has discovered that my son is still alive, Alexander said grimly. They're sending investigators to this city. Maria felt her blood turn cold. How long do we have? Perhaps a week, maybe 2, Alexander said. I've been working to convince them that the child died as planned, but someone has been providing them with information that contradicts my reports. What do we do? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the suburban street where children had been playing earlier that day. There are 2 options, he said finally.
We can run, try to disappear completely. Or we can stand and fight. What does fighting mean in your world? It means challenging the council's authority directly, Alexander said. It means arguing that mixed-blood children should have the right to exist. It's essentially a revolution. Maria sat down heavily on the couch. And, what does running mean?
It means giving up everything you've built here, leaving your siblings behind, and spending the rest of our lives hiding from hunters who will never stop looking for us. Those aren't really choices at all, Maria said quietly.
No, Alexander agreed. They're not. Maria went to check on Damien, who was sleeping peacefully in his crib.
As she looked down at him, she thought about how much he had changed her life. 6 months ago, she had been a struggling maid with no prospects and no hope for a better future. Now she was part of something larger, something dangerous but also meaningful. This child represented the possibility of bridging two worlds that had existed separately for centuries. He was proof that vampires and humans could create something beautiful together, rather than just prey on each other.
Alexander, she said when she returned to the living room, what if there's a third option? What do you mean?
What if we don't run, and we don't fight, Maria said, her mind working rapidly.
What if we prove them wrong instead? Alexander frowned. I don't understand.
You said the council believes mixed-blood children are a threat to vampire secrecy and way of life, Maria explained.
What if we prove that the opposite is true? What if we demonstrate that a child raised with love in both worlds could actually be an asset? How would we do that? Maria smiled, thinking of Damien's unusual intelligence and his strong bonds with her family.
By raising him to be extraordinary. By showing the council that children like him could be bridges between our worlds instead of threats to them.
Alexander was quiet for a long moment. That's a very dangerous gamble, Miss Vasquez. If we're wrong, everyone we care about dies.
And if we're right, Maria countered, we change everything.
Alexander looked at her with something that might have been admiration. You realize what you're proposing? You're talking about fundamentally altering the relationship between vampires and humans.
Maybe it's time for that change, Maria said firmly.
Maybe Damien isn't an accident or an abomination. Maybe he's exactly what both our worlds need.
From upstairs came the sound of Damien stirring in his sleep, making the soft cooing noises that had become so familiar to Maria. She thought about the trust in his unusual eyes, the way he reached for her when he was scared, the way he had brought love and purpose back into her life when she had thought both were gone forever. I'm willing to take that risk, Maria said finally. For him, and for the chance to build something better. Alexander studied her face in the dim light of the living room. Then, we'd better start preparing, he said. Because in a few days, the Vampire Council will arrive in this city, and we'll need to convince them that everything they believed for centuries is wrong. As if sensing the importance of the conversation happening downstairs, Damien's cries grew louder. Maria went to comfort him, picking him up and feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them to protect this child who had already given her more love and purpose than she had ever thought possible. The impoverished maid who had once scrubbed floors for wealthy people who barely acknowledged her existence was now preparing to challenge the most powerful supernatural beings in the world. And she was doing it all for love of a baby who had been thrown away like garbage but who had turned out to be the most precious thing in her life. The real battle was just beginning, but Maria Elena Vasquez was ready to fight for the family she had chosen and the future she believed they could build together.